Hi, and welcome to Pretty, Witty, and Gay, Queer Representation in Musical Theater. This is part one, Playing It Straight, which is musicals before 1980. My name is Joe Slabe, and I love musical theater. I love it so much that I actually founded a company called Forte Musical Theater Guild here in Calgary, and we produce new musicals. So how did my obsession with musical theater start? Well, for me, I was 15 years old and I did West Side Story in high school. I played in the orchestra and I couldn't articulate it at the time, but this play spoke to me directly as a young gay boy in a provincial town about as far from the bright lights of New York as you can get in North America. I loved Anita almost as much as I loved the Jets. They were sexy, she was fabulous, and was also horribly, wonderfully sad. I identified with a love that was taboo and dangerous. The tragic ending was necessary because, as all Catholic school kids know, unsanctioned love doesn't end happily. Yet there was hope. The play hinted that there might be a place for us someday, somewhere. But it was apparent that day had not yet arrived. And I knew in my very DNA that the play meant to say this was as true for a gay boy from Calgary, Alberta, as it was from Tony and Maria. And I've been pretty much hooked since then. I guess I'm kind of a stereotype. So how did musical theater come to be stereotypically associated with gay men? Certainly there are gay men who don't like musicals and there are straight men who do, but there must be something about musical theater that appeals to gay men as a group. Now, it's no shocker that a lot of prominent creators of musical theater are gay. And I'm going to show you that gay themes became coded into the shows even though in the early to mid 20th century, they couldn't write anything explicit. So we're going to look at the shows themselves, see how they function on two levels, one for the predominantly straight audience and one for the gays. Now, this is not a new phenomenon. In the 1920s, if you said that a man was musical, that was code for he was gay. Another way for gay men to identify themselves to each other was to ask if they were a friend of Dorothy, which is an obvious allusion to the Wizard of Oz. Now, the gay allegories in Wizard of Oz are a talk in themselves. As John Clume notes in his book, Something About the Boys, the gay national anthem is still over the rainbow. The gay flag is a rainbow. As gay life is seen in a technicolor Oz, far away from the oppressive, homophobic black and white world in which many gay men were raised. Oh, Oz has dangers, as does living in the urban gay ghetto, but they're mitigated by the fabulousness of the place. There, Dorothy and her queer friends can build their own family. Now, Clume describes this as the seminal gay musical, but there were many lyrics in the works of Lawrence Hart, Cole Porter, and Noel Coward that were open to gay readings too. The fact that these three writers were also men who had sex with other men shed some light on their lyrics. So let's start with Lawrence Hart. His story is pretty sad since he was the incredibly successful writing partner of Richard Rodgers until he essentially drank himself to death. See, he was hopelessly closeted in life, and his lyrics are almost masochistic displays of longing. Hart's characters yearn for love, but they settle for sex. In Bewitched, Bothered, and Bewildered from Pal Joey, Vera understands that Joey is a hustler to be enjoyed and who can't be relied upon to stay. Hart's own encounters with hustlers and rent boys certainly informs this lyric. As well, Cole Porter's Love for Sale explores the same territory and is open to the same reading when you know that although he was married, Porter frequently hired a bit of rough trade on the side. But Cole Porter was also interested in the use of innuendo and was a master of the double entendre. In the 1940s, the use of the word gay as homosexual was just coming into use, and Porter exploited this in his songs. Noel Coward was also a favorite with gay men because of the witty way he alluded to homosexuality in his songs. Mad About the Boy, I don't know if you know it, that's a particular example. In this song, women look upon the poster of a male matinee idol and sing, "He has a gay appeal that makes me feel there's something sad about the boy." And in addition to this, in the 1938 New York production of Words and Music, Coward actually wanted to add the character of a businessman who would look upon the same male screen idol and sing, "And even Dr. Freud cannot explain those vexing dreams I've had about the boy." But in 1938, the theater banned the production from performing this verse. In fact, since the very beginning, homosexual men have been what's referred to as disproportionately represented as creators and performers of musical theater. Among the writers, these have included Lawrence Hart, Cole Porter, Noel Coward, Ivor Novello, Leonard Bernstein, Stephen Sondheim, Jerry Herman, William Finn, Stephen Flaherty, Elton John, Terrence McNally, John Kander, Fred Ebb, Matthew Bourne, Arthur Lawrence, Frederick Lowe, and many directors, choreographers, and performers. So now I'd like to go back to West Side Story and take a closer look. The lyrics for West Side Story are by Stephen Sondheim, music by Leonard Bernstein, and the book or the script of the show is by Arthur Lawrence. These are three gay men, and Jerome Robbins was the choreographer who is credited with conceiving the dance musical treatment of the Romeo and Juliet story. And although he carried on relationships with both sexes over the years, but his longest attachments were with other men, including Tommy Abbott, who played the part of guitar in the West Side Story cast. So, in the instance of West Side Story, we have four creators who are acknowledged geniuses in their fields working on a show that, on one level, tells the story of a conventional heterosexual romance, but on another level carries a gay subtext that can be clearly seen by other homosexual men. As D.A. Miller notes in his book, it's called Essay on the Broadway Musical, he notes that the Golden Age musical that best persuaded the general public of the artistic seriousness of the form, and did so naturally enough on the basis of a virility so sure of itself that it could even get away with the jetés of classical ballet without anyone daring to say, though anyone might have seen from their first cigarette that the Jets were leaping straight out of the pages of gay porn. But it couldn't be too obvious. These cues would be designed to escape notice by the straight audience. So the first scene in West Side Story is a prologue. Stephen Sondheim describes it as Shakespearean. You know who these gangs are, you know their rivals, and it's all done in a style that says you're going to see an evening of a kind of choreographed movement that's neither ballet nor traditional musical comedy dance, but you're going to see action in movement. And it's the vocabulary of this movement that establishes one of West Side Story's most important themes. Violence equals sex. Violence is coded and is the coded and more socially acceptable outlet for homosexual desire. In Robbins' choreography, the chorus boys have become the object of the audience's gaze from the first scene. And in effect, he's turned the conventional definition of the female chorus on its head and eroticized the boys. But these are not boys who primarily interact with girls in their dance routines. These are boys who primarily use dance to express violence against each other. Secondly, we've got the relationship between Maria and Tony. Looks like a conventional heterosexual romance, but it contains relatable elements for the gay audience. Their love is unsanctioned by their society. Their meetings are clandestine, and the consequence of Tony's love for Maria eventually makes him a criminal. All these reflect gay men's experiences. The prologue begins with the Jets enjoying their hard-won turf, but Bernardo arrives and the position of the Jets as the dominant gang on the street becomes increasingly threatened. The character of Arab is caught away from the rest of the gang and he gets his ear pierced by Bernardo. The arrival of Officer Krupke and Lieutenant Schrank puts an end to the fight. And the gangs close ranks and won't rat each other out. As Schrank and Krupke are leaving, Arab yells out a sort of parting shot at them, and he says, they make a very nice couple. Now, this is the thing about West Side Story. It's full of these kind of homophobic slurs that would be sort of at home in any junior high school locker room. And yet you have to wonder, does the show protest too much? Does West Side Story try to maintain its heterosexual credentials by disparaging the thing that it fears the most, that it's a pretty gay show? In fact, in the face of the Puerto Rican invasion of their turf, the Jets agree with Riff that they have to assert their authority over the street in one all-out rumble. And Action assumes that he'll be Riff's lieutenant, as Riff's friend Tony is no longer with the gang. But Riff says, cut it, Action boy. I and Tony started the Jets. And Action replies, well, he acts like he don't want to belong. See, belonging is central to the gang's philosophy. As Wilfred Mellors notes, the words of the Jet song tell us that although the kids don't belong to society, they belong to one another. And that's what gangs are all about. The gangs are persecuted by society due to an accident of birth, which is being born poor. So they band together to define a world where they can live by their own rules. Now, you could apply this to any oppressed group, but the fact that all 4 collaborators on West Side Story were homosexual would inform a gay audience's reading of the show. In fact, in the Jet song, Riff sings, "When you're a jet, if the spit hits the fan, you've got brothers around, you're a family man." Now, he doesn't mean family man in that sort of 50s sitcom conventional way. And while the gang might represent the protection and nurturing absent in the gang's home life, there's another meaning that you can use that can be ascribed to the word family, as in, don't worry about him, he's family, meaning he's gay. So during the Jet song, Riff instructs the gang to dress up sweet and sharp, meet Tony and me at 10 and walk tall. Which sort of to me begs the question, who is the gang dressing up sweet and sharp for? Not for the Jet girls. I mean, they have no dramatic function in the script and seem like they're just there as window dressing to sort of maintain this veneer of heterosexuality around the Jets. So given the instruction to dress up sweet, and given that this instruction to dress up sweet and sharp comes immediately before he references meeting Tony, maybe the gang needs to provide an attractive alternative to the new life that Tony is seeking out. As far as the Jets are concerned, the only American female who serves any function in the story at all is a character named Anybody's. As noted by Marge Tolchin, she's a lesbian writer. She did an online review of the movie version of West Side Story, and this is what she had to say. The character has short cropped hair, a small, lithe, jock dyke build, and wears nothing but a tattered t-shirt and tight jeans, even to the dance. Anybody's is a loyal friend, attempting to save Tony from harm and succeeding in her mission on at least one occasion. She gets sexist, homophobic shit from everyone. Go wear a skirt. What's the freak know about Tony? How else will she get a guy to touch her? It's a retort to an offer to fight with the gang. Eventually, she wins the recognition and grudging admiration of Ice, who tells her, "You done good, buddy boy." The supreme compliment. She's a boy. Anybody's best line in the movie is her announcement, "I ain't never gonna get married." No wonder she caught my attention in the 1960s. The scene outside of Doc's drugstore is another compelling example of gay subtext, because Riff has just arrived to convince Tony to come to the dance to the gym and sort of by extension say he's going to be there with a gang in the rumble against the Sharks. And throughout the scene, it becomes apparent that this isn't a typical teenage friendship. I mean, they've pledged to be with each other unto death. Their pledge to each other is womb to tomb, sperm to worm. And they live in the same house. Riff is living in Tony's house because he can't live with his uncle. Tony in the scene reveals that he's reaching out for something new, something that's coming. And Riff is afraid that Tony's friendship is slipping away, but Tony reassures him and agrees to go to the dance. For the gay audience, this scene creates the very real possibility that Riff's interest in Tony is not just for his value as a gang member. And I mean, let's be honest, has anyone ever seen a Tony who looked like they could take anyone in a fight, especially with that sort of emasculated high tenor voice? The gay man projects into that scene the sort of mutually caring relationship to which he aspires, but which is never seen in the pop culture of the day. In his book, Coming Up Roses, the Broadway musical in the 1950s, Ethan Mordden notes that one can see the primary love triangle in West Side Story as Riff loves Tony, who loves Maria. Now, when we get to the dance at the gym, Robbins' choreography has absolutely nothing to do with the wooing of the dance partner and almost everything to do with territoriality and aggression. I mean, the mambo in particular is all about athletic prowess, strength, and the ability of the gang to hold the dance floor like it was an extension of their turf. What begins as a dance challenge between the leading couples from other gang escalates into this almost brutal collision between the two groups as they storm the dance floors and force the other gang to give way. And the women are primarily extensions of their male partners. They're lifted, they're twirled, frequently by more than one guy. And the dance ends sort of inconclusively as Maria and Tony spot each other from across the crowded gymnasium and dance a delicate cha-cha that musically foreshadows the melody to Maria. But this sort of temporary respite can't last. They're broken up by Bernardo, and while he is upbraiding Maria for dancing with an American boy, Tony's able to learn her name. After he sends Maria home, Bernardo attempts to confront Tony, but he's intercepted by Riff, who arranges for the meeting at Docks for this war council for the terms for the Rumble. While this allows Riff to achieve the reason for coming to the dance, it also protects Tony, who's able to slip off and find Maria. Riff doesn't notice that Tony's left, and he does seem a little inordinate, a little too concerned about his whereabouts. But Diesel says, I will see him at Docks. The scene at Docks before the War Council contains more of this homophobic banter that I talked about. Baby John is the youngest member of the gang, and he's reading comic books. And he says, oh, he don't use knives. He don't even use an atomic ray gun. Arab says, who don't? And Baby John says, Superman. Gee, I love him. And then Snowboy says, so marry him. So Baby John, perhaps stung by his low status within the gang, tries to score points against the only person who has lower status than him, Anybody's. So he says to Anybody's, go walk the streets like your sister. And Anybody's jumps on top of him and forces him to the ground and says, listen, jailbait, I licked you twice and I can do it again. Now, Anybody's use of the words jailbait is a little bit curious in this context, seeing that term is usually applied to underage girls who have sex with older men, leaving the men open to charges of statutory rape. This slur kind of implies that Baby John is an underage male who could be in trouble for the men who sleep with him. So this use of sexual imagery for violence and the implication that violence is then representative of sex reaches its height in the quintet towards the end of the first act. Both gangs are singing, we're gonna rock it tonight, we're gonna jazz it up and have us a ball. They're gonna get it tonight. The more they turn it on, the harder they'll fall. Now, it's interesting that both the terms rock and roll and jazz were originally slang terms for sex before they entered common use as for particular musical styles. And although Anita has already made the connection between dance and sex, she completes the equation by anticipating sex with Bernardo after the violent rumble is over. She says, Anita's gonna get her kicks tonight. It's interesting that in this quintet, Riff doesn't plan to spend any time after the rumble with his girlfriend, Graciela. Instead, he plans to tear up the town with Tony, and throughout the quintet, they reaffirm their womb to tomb worm pledge. So when Tony arrives at the rumble and tries to stop the fight, Bernardo immediately turns on him and tries to goad Tony into fighting him by using slurs against his gender identity and by calling him a pretty boy. So Riff gets offended by this, tries to defend Tony's honor and maybe his own possession of Tony. He ends up attacking Bernardo. They both bring out switchblades and they get into a choreographed fight. Riff is stabbed by Bernardo, at which point he passes his own knife to Tony. Tony's enraged by his friend's death. He exacts his own revenge by thrusting Riff's knife into Bernardo. And with that, he's unable to break free from his gang and realize that he's betrayed both Riff and Maria. Now, at the beginning of Act 2, Maria is unaware of the tragic events of the rumble, and she sings of her upcoming wedding night with Tony. Now, I Feel Pretty is such a classic among gay men that it was recorded by rock and roll gay icon Little Richard on the 1996 album Songs from West Side Story. The fact that homosexual men and gay choruses embrace this song with a vengeance may have something to do with a strained relationship with the song during their formative years. Even in the world of musical theater, this song is just too gay to sing out loud as a boy. Perhaps it's because the song tips its hand in the final stanza, where Maria says, I feel stunning and entrancing, feel like running and dancing for joy, for I'm loved by a pretty wonderful boy. As D.A. Miller points out, Maria may have meant that Tony is a fairly wonderful boy, but a gay audience knows that Tony is a beautiful, wonderful boy. So with Riff dead at the close of Act 1, the dramatic emphasis shifts away from the Jets to the tragic love affair between Maria and Tony. Their love's taboo. It runs counter to the familial and cultural allegiances, and together they dream of a place where their love will be sanctioned, even celebrated by society. Unfortunately, that dream becomes a nightmare in the dream ballet. When Anita interrupts their quiet moment together, she sees the figure of Tony fleeing off into the night, and she says, "Don't you see Tony is one of them?" And then she sings "A Boy Like That." In the song, Anita says that Maria should stick to her own kind, not fall for a boy like that. Anita establishes Tony as an outsider, and the gay audience immediately identifies with her charges. A boy like that doesn't live by the rules of society. By living outside of his ethnicity, his race, and his gang, Tony has shown himself to be untrustworthy. By murdering Bernardo, Tony has committed a crime. The consequences of Tony's affair with Maria have been to make him a criminal, as would engaging in homosexuality at the time that the play was first performed. Still, Maria believes that their unsanctioned love will conquer all, and eventually she convinces Anita to take a message to Tony when she is detained by Lieutenant Schrank. Anita goes to Doc's drugstore, where she's confronted by the Jets. They accuse her of wanting to kill Tony and proceed to enact a choreographed rape. They hoist Baby John aloft. And in this scene, the code of the musical comes full circle. Violence equals sex, and now sex equals violence. And it can't be a coincidence that Anita's violator is the youngest, weakest, and most effeminate of the Jets, Baby John. When Doc intervenes to save her, Anita tells the lie that seals Tony's fate. She says that Chino has shot Maria and that she's never coming to meet Tony. Upon hearing the news of Maria's supposed death, Tony runs into the street, begging Chino to kill him too. Tony and Maria find each other, but Chino shoots Tony at the moment of the embrace, mortally wounding him. Tony says to Maria, "I didn't believe hard enough." And Maria says, "Loving is enough." And Tony says, "Not here. They won't let us be." And Maria says, "Then we'll get away." Of course, loving should be enough to conquer all, but not in a society where love cannot be expressed without being met with prejudice, fear, and hate. Reprising a song from the Dream Ballet, Maria sings "Somewhere," which expresses the hope and optimism of the good life that is ultimately possible as the American ideal of tolerance. It's not the personal tragedy of Maria and Tony that is registered as the final note of West Side Story, but rather the unfinished business of American society. I think that's why West Side Story is such a potent drama for gay people everywhere. The wish for a world where one is free to love who one chooses without being confronted by prejudice and fear is a universal dream, but it's one that carries particular significance to the gay community. The second show that I want to take a close look at is largely considered to be one of the greatest book musical of all time. It's this Gypsy, a musical fable suggested by the memoirs of Gypsy Rose Lee. Gypsy reunited Arthur Lawrence to do the script and Stephen Sondheim writing book and lyrics again, but this time the music was by Julie Stein. Now, if you don't know the story of Gypsy, I'm not going to break it down quite as much as I did West Side Story, but basically, it's the story of Mama Rose and how one of her daughters, Louise, became the most famous stripper in the world. A lot of the psychology of the show is based on sort of mid-20th century analysts, something both Sondheim and particularly Arthur Lawrence would know about, since they both saw analysts in order to work through their homosexuality. So Mama Rose is pretty much a Freudian stereotype of the sort of mother who would create a queer son. It's this sort of strange combination of overbearing and overprotective. And also there's no father in the household until Rose finds Herbie, but even then he's a weak man and he can't protect his charges from the all-consuming Mama Rose. So Louise, the daughter who becomes Gypsy Rose Lee, is going to be the proxy for the gay men in the audience. She spends the entire first act of the play dressed as a boy. And in fact, Rose's first line is "Sing out, Louise," delivered from the house and as portrayed by Ethel Merman, projected in this huge belt. In fact, if you're ever at a sort of gay gathering and someone isn't talking loud enough, chances are some older gay man of a certain generation will yell out, "Sing out, Louise," even if they weren't born when Gypsy came out. And singing out is really what the show is about. Louise has to express who she truly is, even if that means alienating herself from her controlling mother, all of which makes sense in the sort of Freudian context of homosexuality. And one of the scenes that is perhaps the most beloved by gay men in Gypsy is "Dreams of Glory," in which Tulsa explains the act that he's working on to Louise. Louise has to establish Tulsa's trust and says, oh, I won't tell anyone, Tulsa. I'm very secretive, just like you. That is, Louise hopes Tulsa is just like him, and Louise invests himself in Tulsa's fantasy. She says, what would she have to be like, Tulsa? A wonderful singer and dancer, I guess. And he says, no, I'm going to do most of that. I don't mean I'm going to hog it. But they always look at the girl in a dance team, especially if she's pretty. Remember that Louise's moment of transformation comes later in the play when she realized that she could be pretty. In the lyric, Tulsa says, all I need now is the girl. And Louise tentatively does the steps, joins with Tulsa, and he says, that's it, Louise, but do it over here. Give me your hand. And as Tulsa and Louise are united, however briefly, the other reason gay men are drawn to the scene is because Tulsa needs a girl to satisfy the musical theater convention of a woman as the object of desire in the dance team. The woman is absent, and Tulsa is the person that we're looking at on stage. In the end, Louise's moment of transformation comes when she realizes that she could be the object of sexual desire. And it's in this moment of accepting her own sexuality that Louise is empowered by becoming this stripper, Gypsy Rose Lee. And she says to Mama Rose, she says, Mama, I'm pretty. I'm a pretty girl, Mama. But Mama Rose is not happy with the now secondary place that she's taking in Louise's life. And she starts to attack Louise for leaving her. And Louise says, she turns on her and she says, turn it off. Nobody laughs at me because I laugh first. At me from Seattle, me with no education, me with no talent, as you kept reminding me my whole life. And look at me now, a star. Look how I live. Look at my friends, look where I'm going. I'm not staying in burlesque. I'm moving maybe up, maybe down, but wherever it is, I'm enjoying it. I'm having the time of my life because for the first time, it is my life. I love it. I love every second of it. And I'll be damned if you're going to take it away from me. I am Gypsy Rose Lee. I love her. And if you don't, you can clear out now. See, Louise loves her. Gypsy Rose Lee is an alter ego worthy of the greatest drag queen. And the act of laughing at oneself and making the trashy fabulous is the very essence of count. Now, there are a ton of diva shows that spoke to gay audiences over the year, and a ton of more serious shows that dealt with societal prejudices the gay men could project themselves into. But it wasn't actually until the 1980s that gay creators of mainstream musicals began to actually tell their own stories. So I hope that you'll check out my next talk when we'll look at the moment when musical theater came out of the closet and began telling queer stories for real. So thanks for listening. I'm Joe Slabe.